Sadly, within the next 7 minutes that I'm up here speaking to you, 7 Americans will die because of heart disease. Heart disease is the leading cause of death among both men and women. You or someone you know may someday suffer from heart disease, and you might be forced to save their life. How would you react? Would you know what to do? According to the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation, 90% of cardiac arrest victims die because too many bystanders don't intervene due to fear or lack of knowledge. For this reason, it's imperative that we make a national graduation guideline for first aid, CPR, and AED training. As a kinesiology major, I'm currently enrolled in this course. I'm learning how to administer CPR, provide basic first aid, and operate an AED. I've also taken other classes with the American Red Cross, and I'm a strong advocate for taking their other trainings. Today we'll be exploring the variety of reasons why we need this training as the National Graduation Guideline and what this guideline would look like. So as you can see on this next slide, I have some important terminology that I'll be referencing throughout this presentation. According to the Center for Disease Control, 1 out of every 4 people in the United States dies from heart disease. So to put that into perspective, that's this row and these 2 people. 7 people out of our class would die from heart disease. Due to the prevalence of this epidemic and the pressing nature of this epidemic, it's important that we take action immediately. Now, what if I told you that we could double or even triple a person that's in cardiac arrest survival rate? You might ask me, how is that even possible? And the answer is by providing immediate CPR, using an AED, and providing first aid services until emergency responders arrive. Anyone can learn how to do CPR and use an AED, and everyone should. But sadly, according to the American Heart Association, over 70% of Americans feel helpless to act in a cardiac emergency. This statistic should hit close to home because over 85% of cardiac arrests occur at home. So to put it simply, the life that you save with CPR is most likely the life of someone you love. Due to the large number of cardiac arrests that occur outside the hospital, we must be prepared to take action as bystanders. According to the American Red Cross CPR manual, our role is we have 3 jobs as bystanders to do. Our first is to recognize that an emergency exists and to call 911. Our second job is to immediately administer CPR, and our third job is to find and locate an AED and use it. Now that we've established a need for first aid, CPR, and AED training, let's explore what this guideline is going to look like. We need our young adults to have the skills, knowledge, and confidence to respond to an emergency situation. Just like we have to meet certain requirements for PE or health, we could also form a national standard for first aid, CPR, and AED training. Local school districts would be encouraged to adopt this standard, and the federal government would set the guidelines for this standard, and they could also provide financial incentives for the school districts that adopt and participate in this guideline. The federal government would specify that all high school seniors need to successfully be able to conduct CPR, provide basic first aid skills, and operate an AED. Some argue that this requirement isn't possible due to time constraints, but I'd argue that it is, because hands-only CPR training only takes 30 minutes to learn. Also, the entire first aid, CPR, and AED training can be condensed into a 3-hour-long time period. Many argue also against this proposal due to the lack of money or resources, but I propose that we reallocate some of the money that's provided by our Title I budget to fund the training materials and equipment for this, because this investment would prove to be extremely valuable, as we would be enabling millions of students to intervene in the case of an emergency. Let's put this training into perspective. There were 3.6 million high school graduates among us last spring. Now imagine how many lives we could save if those 3.6 million students had undergone first aid, CPR, and AED training. In conclusion, this guideline would enable millions of students to intervene in their communities and to help prevent emergencies. By making it a national high school graduation guideline, we would hold schools accountable for providing our students the skills that they need to exist in the world. Our schools already prepare our teenagers for how to drive. Shouldn't our schools also be preparing our teenagers on how to save a life? Cardiac arrest could happen to you or someone you know, and you might be forced to respond and save their life. By teaching you the skills, providing you the knowledge and experience you need to save their life, we must advocate for the first aid, CPR, and AED training to become a national high school graduation guideline. As Winston Churchill once said, fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. With that, I challenge all of you to support this national graduation guideline so that we can educate our young adults so that they too can have courage in the face of an emergency, because they are our only hope. Thank you.
Do you think it would be as effective or even maybe more effective if we have this requirement for like middle schoolers?
It's an interesting concept. The biggest thing why I'd focus it more towards high schoolers, I would say we need to at least have the education part of it for middle schoolers, but just in terms of body weight, when you're trying to do the CPR and other maneuvers, it's really difficult for a 6-year-old to generate enough force on like a 200-pound male. So just with that kind of scenario, it's a little bit more difficult for them, but I do think that the knowledge is incredibly valuable. Yes?
Do you know if any high schools have already adopted the guidelines, or is it not like brought up at all?
Yes, right now it's currently in debate. Because the federal government can't mandate it for all schools across the nation, it's really state by state and school district by school district. A lot of states are in the process of proposing new bills. In my state, Oregon, we're in the process of encouraging grades 7th through 12th. So 7th, they're doing more education programs, and then starting in high school, they want to use the mannequins and try and incorporate more of the hands-on. It's currently in the process of getting approved by our governor, but certain states it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. But ideally the goal is to see all states adopt this new policy. Yes.
Just first want to comment, we did it at my high school. I learned CPR. And also you mentioned allocating money from the Title I fund. What is that fund and how come? How does it relate to CPR?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically the federal government has these Title I programs that help us meet certain requirements. So we have like our English requirements or our different health and PE requirements, and they have this budget that they use which encourages all of the public schools nationwide to carry out these programs so that they're adequately preparing usually their high school seniors for either a career or college or whatever their plans may be. And so we do have this big portion of money, and whatever they don't use, they do have to report what they're putting it towards, but there are ways to put it towards things that may not be as vital. And I think that learning how to save a life is probably one of the most vital life skills. And so I think that we could take a portion of that that's maybe put towards different sports equipment or different events at the school, and put this towards purchasing the mannequins and the face guards and the other things that are required for the training. Yeah.
Sorry. Do you have any ideas as to how this could be enforced in private schools that aren't funded by the government?
Yes, that's a really challenging part that a lot of schools are dealing with, because as a state, states don't really have the jurisdiction to say, oh, as a private school, even though you're not receiving funding from us, you have to do this. And so I think the biggest thing with the private schools is maybe just focusing more on encouragement and saying this is a really beneficial thing. And the cool part is that Congress recently recognized June 1st through the 7th as our national awareness for CPR and AED education. So I think by maybe encouraging private schools to focus on that event and possibly maybe working with the American Red Cross or the Heart Association to get grants so that they can purchase the equipment to teach those courses. Yeah.